Begin the current Daf Pesachim Daf Nun Tes. Begin on the bottom of the Testament base, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yommi. But the Gemara continues the opening of our parak Tamid Nishchet, which discusses the order of the karbanis as they were on Erev Pesach. Shares corresponds with Kazakh and Chesket or any type of Daf. Krishna was joining us for today's Daf. Some of the things we discuss in today's Daf are the afternoon ketayros and the lighting of the menorah, which was every single evening in the Beis Hamikdash, were they before the Korban Pesach or were they after the Korban Pesach? All agree that Mechusei Kippurim, people that are still lacking atonement, they bring their karbanis after Tamid Shel Bein Habayim and Erev Pesach, although generally nothing's supposed to be brought after Tamid Shel Bein Habayim. They agree by Erev Pesach that you could bring the karbanis that you still need to bring to have your complete atonement. However, there's a machlekes regarding what about a typical day? Are you allowed to go ahead, even not on Erev Pesach, can you bring the karbanis that you still need for your atonement on that day after Tamid Shel Bein Habayim? Some of the key terms and concepts discussed in today's Daf are ketayros, which are the incense that were brought every single evening in the Beis Hamikdash. Mechusei Kippurim is the idea that although generally a person that's tamei could immerse himself in the mikvah and by sundown he's totally tar, but for certain individuals they're not considered completely tar until they have their karbanas they're supposed to bring, like mitzayra and zav and zav. There's certain individuals that still they're still lacking atonement. A seder shlama is that by the carbon tamid, it has to be the last carbon of the day, and there's a particular commandment saying you're not supposed to bring anything after the carbon tamid shel bein habayim. Kahanim's reasoning is a concept that Kahanim are very assiduous, they're very meticulous, and have a lot of alacrity. They're very careful, and we're not concerned that they're going to stumble in halacha. And Kahanim Oichel B'Bayim Miskarim is the idea that the Kahanim they're eating from the karbanis actually is part of the atonement of the owners who are bringing the carbon. So beginning the current Daf. Second line up in the bottom of the other. Turn on the brisa. So we're discussing here the order of the karbanos of the Avodah and Erev Pesach. Tamid, the daily sacrifice that's brought Bein Habayim in the evening, is Kodim LePesach. Again, although nothing's usually brought after the Korban Tamid Shel Bein Habayim, Korban Pesach is an exception. The Tamid is brought before the Pesach. Pesach Kodim LeKedayos. Then the Pesach was brought before the evening, the Ketayros Shel Bein Habayim, the incense that was brought in the evening, and the Gemara learns out all these different, what's the reason for these things. Ketayros Kademis and Neiros, and the Ketayros were brought, were set where they were burnt before the lighting of the candles in the evening. And the Gemara explains the reason for this thing, why it was like this. So first we go through the first part of the brisa, which said that the Korban Tamid is before the Korban Pesach. Says the brisa, it's logically like to tell you this, because you ucher davar, you should delay something, meaning referring to the Korban Pesach. By the Korban Pesach, it says in Devarim Tezayin, Tizbach as a Pesach ba'erev, and in Shmei Beis it says B'shach do'isai, and it says Bein Arbayim. So you're going to delay something that says both ba'erev and Bein Arbayim, l'davar to something referring to the Korban Tamid. Shalei nema by ba'erev. It doesn't say in the evening. Ela Bein Arbayim bulvad, only between the evenings, which is a little bit earlier. So therefore, we know that the halach is going to be that by the Korban Tamid, it only says as a kevas l'shein netas Bein Habayim. So that's why you do the Korban Pesach after the Korban Tamid shel Bein Habayim. Again, we had asked, well, why would that be? And that's what we're saying will be the source, because it says be'erev and Bein Habayim. But then says the question is, if that's the case, Ketayros v'neiros nami nikadmu lePesach. Then why do we say in the brisa that the order is the Korban Tamid, then Korban Pesach, then Ketayros and Neiros? What do you mean? Ketayros and Neiros should also be before the Korban Pesach for that same reason. You should delay something, the Korban Pesach, which has again these two terminologies. Because by Ketayros and Neiros it says one Bein Habayim, which is in Shema Islam, it says when he's going to light the candles in the evening, then he should burn the incense. And the word Bein Habayim is going on both the Ketayros and the Neiros. So it only says Bein Habayim. So the same reason you say by the Taidu, it only the Tamid. It says only one time Bein Habayim. Therefore, the Pesach is after that. So Pesach should be after the Ketayros and the Neiros too. Well, that says the Brisa and Oshani Hasan. There it's different. Why? Because the Mir Drachman, the Torah has an exclusion by the Neiros, where it says Oisai. And Oisai excludes that nothing could be after the Neiros and the Ketayros, which is compared to it. So that's why the Korban Pesach is before it. The time like learn the brisa. It says in the pasuk Me'erev Boker that you should light the candles in the Beis Hamikdash every day from evening till morning. What does it mean from evening till morning? So first of all, it's 10 lemidasa. You should put in the measurement into the cups of the candles a half a lug for every single ner, because there's no light that's longer that won't last at least the measurement of a chatzi lug. Shatei Delekes Me'ered Biker. So it shall light from evening till morning. So what does it mean Me'ered Biker? The candles in the Beis Hamikdash shall light from evening till morning. Another thing that the pasuk is telling us is there is no other service in the Beis Hamikdash that's valid from the evening until morning. Only this itself. Meaning, what's saying Me'ered Biker is to say this is the only thing that the avodah should be doing from Me'ered Biker. Now, my time, what's the reason? Because Amar Kar, the pasuk says in Shemais, it says Yarach Oisai Aaron Avanav. Aaron and the son should prepare the candles Me'ered Biker from evening till morning. Which is telling us when it says Oisai is exclusionary, saying just this. Oisai Me'ered Biker, only this should be from evening till morning. There shouldn't be anything else from evening until morning. Which means that there's no avodah that's kosher afterwards to start. Obviously, we do with Aktaras Simurim, but to start, the only thing that you're going to start doing the avodah is the neighbors. Nothing else can be done after that point. So you see the last thing. So obviously, you can't do the Pesach after the neighbors because this is the only one. And says the Brayse, the Iskish Keteris L'Neiros, and the Keteris are compared to the neighbors in that same pasuk. It says V'halas Aharnas and Neiros Ben Ibrahim Yakteren. When he goes and he lights the candles, then he should bring the Keteris. So it's comparing the Keteris to the neighbors. So just like the neighbors, there's no avodah that's valid afterwards. Also the Keteris, there's no avodah that's valid afterwards, and that's why the Korban Pesach is not going to be brought after the neighbors and the Keteris. Although it says Bein Arbayim and Be'erev, and that's why he said it comes after the Korban Tamid. But you're right. For that reason, it should. But it's because there's a miyut that says Oisai, you can't have anything after the neighbors, and the Keteris are compared to the neighbors. Now, although we just said this logic, however, there is a brisa that actually says V'tanya. We learned the brisa Kikushin. Actually, like how we asked the question, meaning the questions we asked in the first brisa, that we said, hey, the Korban Pesach should be after the Keteris and neighbors too, and we answered, we said, oh, because there's Oisai, but actually there's a brisa that says like this version of the question. It says this brisa is a different interpretation. Tamid Kodim LeKeteris. The Korban Tamid, like the first brisa, the Tamid is the first in the evening, the daily evening sacrifice, is before the Keteris. Keteris, which is the incense. The Keteris, Keteris L'Neiros, then the Keteris is before the Neiros, and the reason for this is brought in Seftes Yuma and Perkam Lamuna. Why is the Keteris before the Neiros and after the Tamid? And the Neiros Kodim LePesach, and the Neiros then comes before the Pesach. Again, not like the first brisa. The previous brisa had that it was Pesach, Keteris, and Neiros. In this brisa, we have Keteris, Neiros, then Pesach. It says this brisa why. Exactly as we had asked in the first brisa is actually how the second brisa holds. You should delay something that it says in the Be'er Ben Abayim, which is the Korban Pesach. The Davar Shloimy Schwartzberg Ben Abayim Bavad. Neiros and Keteris only have one term of Ben Abayim, so therefore you're going to have Pesach after that. But then the question is, wait, but the first brisa addressed that question and it said V'ksiv Oisai. The first brisa says, but it says Oisai, only this could be from evening until morning and nothing else. How can you have the Korban Pesach after Keteris and Neiros? Says the Gemara, Hi Oisai, that Oisai is not coming to exclude the Korban Pesach, which is done outside of the Heichel. Rather, it's mibayla, you need to exclude another avodah that's done inside the Heichel. Meaning it's logical when you're saying Oisai to exclude, you're excluding something that's similar to it categorically. Remind you, or what are we excluding when we're saying that only the neiros can be done by Erba Biker? It's Keteris, we're excluding the Keteris. Because both the neiros and the Keteris are what's called avodas panim. They're both done inside the Heichel. So when we're saying by the neiros, Oisai, only this can be from evening until morning, which means they never can be after that, we're not excluding the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach we're not comparing to. Korban Pesach is done on the Heichel. It's a Mizbeach Hachitzin. When we're saying Oisai, we're excluding another similar type of avodah, which is that of the Keteris. We're saying only the neighbors are done last and not the Keteris. Because it's more explained, so good that you would have thought to say, since the Pasuk says the Shemais that we mentioned before, which is the source of Keteris and neighbors, both being done at the end of the day. It says, Vahalas Aaron, the neighbors bring their burning the Keteris. I know that when Aaron goes and elevates and lights the candles in the evening, that's when they should burn the Keteris. Same, I would say, if you read the Pasuk, it sounds like that Navlik Neres Beresha, first light the candles, Vahadanach the Keteris, and then go ahead and burn the Keteris. It says, when he was lighting the candles in the evening, then Yaktaran, you should burn the Keteris. So from reading the simple translation of the Pasuk, it would sound like first you light the candles and then you burn the Keteris. Oh, Mitrachmana Aisai. That's what they're trying to tell you. No, Aisai, when it talks about the lighting of the candles, Yarach Aisai Arnavanav, that only this is going to be Me'ervad Baker. Nothing else is going to be after that, which comes to exclude and says that no, the Keteris is before that of the neighbors. But it's not excluding the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is still going to be after the two of them. But then the Gemara says, well, but with the reading of the pasuk that we mentioned seems to indicate not like that. It sounds like that when you're lighting the candles, sounds like that it should be after that. I understand you're trying to tell me Ois is excluding it, but then how do you read the pasuk? It says, this is what the Torah is saying. The Idan, the Medlekas Neiros, when you go at the time when you're lighting the candles, what's Bahalois Esan Baalzanis Neiros? Tehema Ketara Ketairis. The Ketairis should have already been burning on the incense, should be burning already on the coals. That's what we're telling you, that it's at that time that it should already be burning. So it's not that saying then you go and you burn the Ketairis. Bahalas, Arnis, and Neiros, at that point the Ketairis should already be burning, and therefore that's why the order is Ketairis, then Neiros, then Pesach, according to the second brisa, although according to the first brisa it's Pesach, then Ketairis, then Neiros. Now continue on the order of the Avodah, Tanabanda, we learn the brisa, there's nothing that's burnt on the fires of the Mizbeach. That's going to be before the daily morning sacrifice. There is one exception. Ketairis is the first thing that's brought before the carbon tamid. Remember, because the reason is it says in Parshas Tetzaveh Babaker regarding the Ketairis, it says in the morning. Now the carbon tamid only says one time Baker. So therefore, B'yuktim Ketairis, you're going to do first the incense, which is Davish by Babaker in the morning, which means say really early in the morning. Where it says V'hektolav Aaron Ketairis Samin Babaker. You're going to do that before the Davish by Babaker Echad, before the carbon tamid, which only says one time the word Baker. Baker is morning, which is earlier in the morning, and therefore you'll do it first the Ketairis and then the carbon tamid. But generally, nothing can be brewed before the Tamid Shal Shachar. So to go into the evening, and there's nothing that can generally be brought after the evening carbon tamid, Ella, but rather, like we said, the exceptions before, Ketairis, the incense, the Neiros, there was Ketairis in the morning, Ketairis in the evening, just like the carbon tamid. So the only thing that can be brought before and after is actually Ketairis, the Neiros and the lighting of the candles, Pesach and the carbon Pesach, as we learned in the previous Daf, Umechusik Kippur be'erva Pesach. Additionally, and this is what we're going to discuss a little bit more now, as something that we didn't mention in the previous braces, someone who's lacking atonement on Erev Pesach. So for example, let's say someone was a Mitzayir or a Zav, where he forgot and they didn't bring his kapara, his atonement, his halacha, that he has to bring a carbon, which is part of his atonement for his tumah. He didn't bring it before the carbon tamid shel ben abayim. Now the problem is like this: if he doesn't bring his mechutzi kippurim, his carbon, he's not going to be able to eat the carbon Pesach, because the mechutzi kippurim is usher for kachim, and the other punishment of karas if he eats kachim, so he's stuck. So therefore, although generally, according to this opinion, you're not allowed to bring mechutzi kippurim after the tamid shel ben abayim. You forgot. There's no way you can't bring anything after tamid shel ben abayim. Erev Pesach, we let you go ahead and sacrifice it, because you're not going to then be able to have the carbon Pesach if you don't bring your carbon. So the halacha shetei b'sheinis, he goes and immerses himself a second time, meaning as Rashi says, although he tabled already yesterday on the seventh day of purification, he has to table again after he brings his kapara, as the Mishnah teaches in Perek Chavim B'Kodesh, they einin mechutzi kippurim, they need to have tefillah and chagiga for their kachim, and then b'oicheles pesach, then they can use carbon Pesach in the evening. Now Shmuel ben Eish Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika, he says even more. He says af mechutzi kippurim b'shayim meisa shana. He says forget about Erev Pesach. Any day of the year, if someone forgot to bring his carbon, if he brought, let's say, his shalom and adava, he brought a carbon shalom as an adava before the tamid. The problem is he was also mechutzi kippurim. He was a mitzayir coming off his tzaras. If he doesn't bring his kapara, he's not going to be able to eat his carbon shalom. Like the pasuk says, kachim, it requires that whether it has to be with someone that has an atonement, whether it's eaten to the Kanim or whether it's eaten by the Yisraelim. So Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says that here also, if you forgot to bring your mechutzi kippurim before the carbon tamid shel ben abayim, you could go ahead and bring it after the carbon tamid shel ben abayim. You could go ahead and immerse yourself and eat kachim in the evening. So the Gemara now discusses the two different opinions regarding the carbon of mechutzi kippurim on a regular day of the year. It says the Gemara, Bishlam Tanakama, understand the Tanakama, who said that only time you can bring the mechutzi kippurim, that's the mitzayir or the zav is carbon, after the carbon tamid shel ben abayim is only on Erev Pesach. We could understand it. Because the other I say the Pesach, shesh by karas, because the pasuk commandment of eating the carbon Pesach, which if you don't bring the carbon Pesach, you get a pasuk of karas, v'yitcha say dashlama, and that will override the positive commandment of what we said in the previous step of la hashlem. Hashlem means to say everything has to be completed after the tamid shel shachar. Nothing can be brought after the tamid shel ben abayim. So, because that's she'im by karas, that it's a positive commandment that doesn't have a bunch of karas. So obviously, eating the carbon the Pesach is more important than not bringing something up to Tam Shabbat Abayim. And to bring the Mechutz Kippurim is integral to allow you to go ahead and eat the Korban Pesach. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says, "My Umad say, what's any stronger? The positive commandment of eating kachim, Mahayaseh, of the positive commandment of not bringing anything after coming to Tam Shabbat Abayim, which is the Aseh the Hashlama. Why are you going to say you could bring it? You're violating Aseh the Hashlama. So what are you saying? Oh, of course I'm doing it after Tam Shabbat Abayim because that's not guilty to come in my Shalmei that I brought. That's an Aseh. Who said, why is Aseh? Aseh is not doing another Aseh. So why are you allowing the person just do Shabbat Tasa? Why are you letting him go ahead and bring his carbon after Tam Shabbat Abayim? Yeah, I'm saying, so what nicer, meaning it, but it's, if it doesn't become a carbon, he's violating anything of nicer. If it doesn't become a carbon. Sounds like it does not becoming a carbon. If he doesn't bring his become a carbon, he's saying Asham and the Dava.
It could be a carbon, but he just can't eat it. That's what Rashi says.
Ah. I mean, you say if he doesn't, he can't eat it. Right, but there's a mitzvah sevachidus kachim. Right. So he can't eat it. Right, sounds like that. It's not that. Only he can't eat it. He's not. Right, only he can't eat it. So that's what I'm saying. For his eating, so why would we allow him to go ahead and violate the Aseh Dashlam? Some Ravina, Rav Chizit, says Hach over here that Rabbi Shmuel says that even the Chutz Kippurim. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about specifically a mitzvah that's an ani. That, and the Gemara brings two answers for this question. That she'ein b'chatas oifaskin. We're talking about what type of chatas we're talking about. Avi mechutz Kippurim is a bird carbon. She'ein mizbeach elo dam. Mizbeach only has the blood, and it's eaten by the kahanim, and there is no haktara. So the Aseh Dashlam, Rashi explains, is only by haktara, by burning things. You're not allowed to go ahead and burn something on the mizbeach after the Kamat Shabbat Abayim. Now, the purification of a mechutz kipara, they sometimes bring a few different karbanos. Their kapara is dependent on the karbachatas, which over here is an oif, is a bird carbon. Like it says in the Yikrid Beis, that's by the karbachatas, by the Yeledis, who's also one of the mechutz kipara, has to bring a carbon. So therefore, it's like chapping it oif, which means to say, you're right, we're not really violating the Aseh Hashlama, because here we're talking about that only the blood is burned on the mizbeach. You're not doing any burning on the mizbeach. So therefore, the reason why you could go ahead and bring, according to Shlomo Schwartzberg, any mechutz kipparim after the Talmud Shal Bein Abayim is because you're not violating the Aseh Dashlam. Because you're talking about a mitzvah ani who his karbachatas is an oif, and that doesn't violate the Aseh Dashlam. So that's why you could bring it after that of the Talmud Shal Bein Abayim. That's one approach. But Rav Papam, he says, "Afil tema b'chatas behema." He says, you can even talk about not by an ani, let's say. That's a regular mitzvah, who his karbachatas is an animal. So then the question is, wait a second, it's an animal, so then you're going to be violating the Aseh Hashlama. Why is it the Aseh of eating your carbon shalmi, the number that you brought earlier in the day, to be able to go ahead and eat it? Why would that mitzvah Aseh go ahead and violate the Aseh of not bringing anything after the Kamat Shabbat Abayim? Says he also has a chap. He says what you do is mala, you bring it up to the top of the mizbeach, umalina b'reish mizbeach, and you leave it out overnight on top of the mizbeach. Like the pasuk says, "V'krivu l'fnei Hashem v'chipro leha," that tomorrow you'll sacrifice it after the Talmud Shel Shachar, because although lina, leaving it overnight, is invalidating, it does not invalidate on top of the mizbeach. Like the Gemara says in Zvachim, the Pesachim Daf, that according to everyone, you're not going to go ahead and take it out. So therefore, you're not violating Aseh Dashlama because you're not burning it after the Talmud Shabbat Abayim. You're just going to put it on top of the mizbeach, and it's going to stay over there overnight. And the next day, you're going to go ahead and burn it. So it's also a chap. Both of them are answering essentially that they're not violating the Aseh Hashlama, either because it's a chatas oif, which you're not burning anything anyway, or it's a chatas beim, but you're not going to go ahead and do it at night. You're going to leave for the next day. But then the Gemara says, wait, we're talking about a mechutz kippurim. Mechutz kippurim, that they're lacking atonement, although that the atonement depends on their chatas, but they have other karbanas too. What are you going to do with the asham etzaira, which doesn't come as oif? The chatas oif, the chatas of the ani could be an oif, but the asham cannot be a bird carbon. So the Gemara explains. So Bishul or Papa Zorn said, Papa, the second answer that he said, Ahainu de Malallah. So he says, fine, no problem. He's saying we're leaving it overnight. So here also, this animal carbon, you leave it overnight. You're not doing it after, not violating Nasei Dashlam. And Rav Chizma, according to Rav Chizma, Michael, what are you going to say? You still are a Mechusik Kiparim, which, because the Chatas is a Eif, that you can do, but he doesn't say the option about leaving it overnight on top of the Rebbe. And it's an animal carbon. What are you going to do with that carbon? It doesn't have his complete atonement. So Amri, they said, Shakar Vashamai, you already went and you sacrificed your carbon Hashem already. When we're saying over here the guy forgot to bring his Mechusik Kipurim, it was only the Chatas that he didn't bring. He already brought his Hashem. And he brought a Shalom and a Dava. We'll be able to, because it just is an Eif carbon. He's just going to be throwing the blood. He doesn't have to burn anything after the Tamash B'Nabai. But that's the Gemara V'Ka'ila, but there's a carbon Eila. What do you do with the Eila? There's not only a Chatas and an Hashem, there's an Eila too that the Mitzvah has to bring. And V'chitim, we begin to say Eila Lema'akva, that the Eila is not Ma'akiv. As Rashi points out, people might be wondering, the Chatas and the Hashem, it was obvious to the Gemara that they're ma'akiv the tahara for eating of kachim. So although they keep kaparas with the chatas, but you to be ma'akiv the tahara, to eat the kachim, you have to bring the chatas, like we find by Yeledis, and asham, where that's put on the behind they take the blood and they throw it on the thumb and the toe and on the ear of the mitzayra. So those are definitely ma'akiv. Question is, the Gemara is entertaining out to say, maybe the oil is not ma'akiv. You're right, you didn't bring the oil yet, but okay, you could still go ahead and eat kachim. Says the Gemara, you can't say that because Batanya learned the Brayso. Shmuel ben Neshur Bichman Briko Imi says, Shem Shechat Tasav Hashem and Ma'akiv. Just like the Chatas and the Hashem is ma'akiv, it holds back the validity of someone eating kachim. Kachalase Ma'akvase, so to the oil is ma'akiv. Okay, and Bechitim, maybe you're going to say like we said by the other approaches. Okay, fine, but Shekar V'Alas, we're talking about where the oil was already brought. The guy brought his Hashem and his oil already, just forgot to bring his Chatas, and that's what we're saying, you could do it after the Tamash Ben Abayim. Says Gemara, it's not possible. Can you really bring the oil before you ever brought your chatas yet? And you tell me he didn't bring his chatas yet? How could it be that he brought his oil? But by the time you learn the brisa, the pasuk that he's going to sacrifice that which he has for his chatas first. What's the pasuk coming to teach us? In other words, if you think the pasuk here is coming to tell me that you should bring your chatas before the oil, the pasuk really says over there. But the second one should be the carbon oil according to the judgment, according to the law. And that said after that pasuk, this is by Shvuas Bitur, when someone takes an oath, a false oath. So we already know that if the second one is an oil, the first one is going to be chatas. So why do you have to say chatas rishayna? Rather zebana av. This is what's called a building block, a mamatzinu. That from this pasuk you build out a foundation to teach you l'chol chatos. It's an extra pasuk because we already know that from if the second one's a oil, the first one's a chatas. So why is he saying the unnecessary to tell you l'chol chatos every chatas? Sheikoigmis l'chol oilos that they should always be before. They should always be before the oila. They should always come first. For example, the yeledis of a wealthy woman that she brings her. So to teach you that she comes to chaloilis haboizim and that they should be before every other comes for them. Now says the Gemara, the Kaimla, and this is taking what we're saying one step further. The Gemara tells in Zvachim on Daf Tzadim and Aleph and Perkal Atadar that really even this binyan av is unnecessary. We always know that chatas comes before oif. Riyad is coming to tell you if a chatas ha'oif is coming with an oilas behema, for example, a wealthy woman who gave birth, that she brings her oilas behema and the chatas ha'oif, that even over there, which generally animal carbon is more chashuv than the bird carbon, even over there we're going to say that you're first going to bring the chatas ha'oif before the oil. That for the chatas ha'oif kedemas oilas behema, that even the chatas ha'oif is going to be before the oilas behema. So we're back to the question essentially. We see that the oila is ma'akiv, as Shmuel ben Neshur said. We also can't say that it was already brought because we see clearly that the chatas has to be before the oila, as we see that even a chatas ha'oif, which is the case that we're talking about over here, of the poor one that brings the chatas ha'oif, even over there that comes before the oilas behema. The behema is more chashuv. So if you tell me you didn't bring the chatas yet, that means you didn't bring the oil yet. So how's it going to help with the chatas that's an oif, that you could spray the blood after the Tamash Ben Abayim because there's no haktara, but there's still the oila, which is a behema that you didn't bring yet, and it's ma'akiv. So it says the Gemara, Omer Rabbi says, no, it's actually not difficult, because Shani Oil is Mitzvah, this one oila of the Mitzvah that we're discussing with the Mechusik Gemara is actually the one exception. Although generally you can never have the oila before the chatas, which therefore we found it difficult to how you can have your kapara to eat your shalmi nedava if you didn't bring your chatas. Always said because of oif, but what's with the oila? No, you actually did bring your oil already. I thought you can't bring the oil before the chatas. No, oil's matzah is different. Rachmanim, the Torah says we continue them in bays. It says in Vayikra Behela Kohen Es Oila that the kohen will elevate the carbon oila, and this is written after the chatas. Now, for the fact that it should have written Ves Oila Yala, it should say, and then after the chatas, the kohen will bring it up, and it says Vehala, which is like in the past tense. He brought it up, tells you Shehala Kvar, that he already brought it even before the chatas, that he's going to have an atonement up. Therefore, that resolves everything that we said, that B'chutzi Kipara all year round, yes, could go ahead and have his, have the chatas being brought afterwards, according to either interpretation, but even according to the one that says that you cannot be Mala Malina, that you said that no, it's just because it's the chatas oil. We said, what do you do with the oila? The oila already was brought. I thought you can't have oila before chatas. The one exception is b'diavad of the mitzayra that the pasuk says vehela that already was brought even before that of the chatas. Right. Right. It just sounds like right. Taisus also says something. The dafke b'diavad. So the head of acha yishkat says oila. Taisus says only dafke b'diavad. So now the Gemara goes and however asks on what we just said. Amar le Rav Shimon bar Abba Rav Papa lididach according to you, meaning Rav Papa, which was the second interpretation. Rav Papa said that what you do is you leave it out overnight on the top of the mizbech. So lididach according to you, Dami, that you said malam le mizbech, then you go ahead and bring it up and you leave it on top of the mizbech. You want to say it's even by chatas behema, and you said fine, it's not violating. I say dashlama. You're right. I say cannot be derech and I say, but you're not violating it because you're only going to burn it tomorrow. But then kayamin. That means to say we're going to do something like that. The possibility they cause is going to cause them to make a stumbling. Because the Sabi, the Kahanim, they're busy all night long. They're burning the Avarim, the Pedarim, the Emurim from the whole day. The Sabi, they're going to think the Yemihu, that this is from today's Karbanis. Vas They're going to come to sacrifice when they're burning all night long all the limbs from the Karbanis that was slaughtered and the blood was thrown before the Karban Tamid. They're going to see these limbs. They're going to think, oh, these are also from today's leftovers, and it's supposed to be burned today, and they're going to burn it, and they're going to violate the Aseh Dashlama. How can you go ahead and leave something on top of the Mizrach? It's going to cause a stumbling block to the Kahanim. Amalei said to him, no Kahanim is reason him. Kahanim are very careful, and whoever's going to put up this guy, this person who forgot to bring his carbon of the Mechutzi Kiparim, but he has to eat a shisham and a dava, that the guy says, okay, he puts it on the side, he says, lets his Kahanim brothers know, he says, be careful with this is not for tonight's stuff, this has to go ahead and be burned tomorrow. Well, Kahanim are not concerned that they're going to stumble, because they're very careful. Now, but Amalei Rav Ashler of Kahana, and he's asking again on Rav Papa's teaching, who says Malina, that you leave it overnight on top of the Mizbeach. Rabbanan, some say it's actually Rav Hundred, Rav Nassan, he asked straight to Rav Papa himself. He says, another question. He says, as long as the sacrificial parts of the karmachatas are not burned, you're telling me what you do is you leave it on top of the mizbech. That means to say that the emurim, which are the sacrificial parts that you're supposed to burn, are not being burned, because or else you're going to violate the Aseh Dashlama. So if you didn't burn it, then kahanim lematzach lebasar. That means that then the kahanim cannot eat the meat of the chatas, and then that means to say the bayram not going to have a kapara, and there's still going to be mechutz kaparim. How's he going to eat his kachim? Because the time you learn the brisa, yachlu you can rishon b'chazim b'shag. You would think that the kahanim would be permitted to eat the breast and the thigh, which are the parts that are given the kahanim from the shlamim, koyd maktar simun before the sacrificial parts are burned. That's the positive by Ukraine. It says the kahanim is going to burn the fats, which are the sacrificial parts, what we call the murman mizbeach. V'hader, only then the pasuk says that then the breast is going to be for their sons. But as long as the kahanim don't eat the meat, so again, if you don't bring the sacrificial parts, the kahanim can't go ahead and eat. And now the Gemara establishes that the kahanim cannot eat. The kahanim don't get an atonement, so that you defeated the whole purpose. The whole purpose is trying to make this guy into mechutzi kipurim, so that then he could go to Yisham Nidava. And how are you going to do that? By putting it on the top. What'd you help? What'd you do? You didn't accomplish anything, because as long as the sacrificial parts are not burned, although you did the shchita and the zrika, but the kahanim can't eat. They can't eat. The owner doesn't have an atonement. Like the brisa. This is by the Milur. When the inauguration of the Mikvah, they're going to eat them asher kupar beham, that they're going to get an atonement with them. So by the eating, it mentions the terminology of kapar to say that even with eating, now you know about the Rebbe's Matit Essen, you see what grace is and tzaddikim, the atonement depends on the eating. Malamadis teaches Shakan Oichum Valmaskaprim. This is actually that's actually that idea about the Rebbe's is actually from Mesilsa Sham. When he talks about there by Kedusha, it says when you feed, you pour wine into the throat of a tzaddik, it's mamish like the Nisach HaYayin, when you give them food to eat, mamish Baalam, it says Kahanim Oichlim and Baalam Eskaprim. When the Rebbe eats, then it's an atonement for the ganze Kehillah. But the point is he defeated the whole point. You can't go ahead and gain anything by putting it on top of the Mizbech because the Kahanim can't eat and Kahanim can't eat. The Baalam don't have a kapar. Somebody said to him, no, it's not true. Kivin Delay After, since right now it's not possible to burn these emurim because of the Asay of Ashlama, because you can't do anything as Tumash Ben Abayim. So Asam, they really made it Kimishanit Moshe Abdu, as if the emurim were Tameh or got lost, because you can't do anything with it right now. So actually, the Kahanim are permitted to eat the meat, and therefore it will be an atonement for the owners. The time I've learned the Brisa. Yachol, you would think that let's say they won't get tameh or will get lost. You would think, okay, that they won't merit to be able to eat from the breast and from the thigh, because you said it's only after their sacrifice that the Torah then tells you that then they could eat. The breast will be for Aaron and his sons, whatever the situation is. You see that it's going to be theirs. Meaning to say, if it's tameh or whatever, so fine, then you have no choice. Of course, in order, we first do the emurim and then they can't eat, but they're going to get it by hook or by crook. And therefore, if it's tamei or got lost, fine, they're still going to get it. And here it's like it was nitma v'menevet, because you can't go ahead and sacrifice it. You can't sacrifice, okay, then they can be able to eat. If they can eat, then the bailam are going to have their kapara, and therefore they're going to be able to go ahead and then eat their sham and nedava. And that's why Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says that even on a regular day, you could go ahead and bring him a chutzik kibburim after Tumash Ben Abayim, although you're not allowed to. Say Dashlama. Either it's chatas sa'if, or it is malin b'rish mizbech. You're not going to burn it on the mizbech after Tumash Ben Abayim. You can leave it there on the top, and again, they'll still be considered as if they had their atonement with the Kahanim eating their things. Now, the Gemara continues a related type of a discussion regarding after the Tumash Ben Abayim, regarding lina, regarding leaving out things all night, and as they relate to the top of the mizbech. Kali Rami posed the following contradiction. The pasuk says in Shalais, don't leave over the fats of my karbanos of the Yom Tiv until the morning. Now the diuk, the inference is you can't leave them out overnight until the morning. But the whole night you could leave it out on the bottom on the floor of the Azara, and then the whole night long you could bring it up and sacrifice it on top of the mizbech, and it does not become invalid unless you come by the break of dawn and it's still on the bottom. Then it's going to become possible lina. So obviously, all night long you could burn it on the mizbech. The problem is, except there's a pasuk that says Victor Leha, that you're going to sacrifice on it, meaning, as we said in the previous stop, on the Tumash Shachar, Chel v'Hashlamim, the fats of the Shlamim, which teaches us Allah Hashlam Kagans Kulam, that you have to go out and bring all your karbanas after Tumash Shachar, which sounds like then nothing can be brought after Tumash Ben Abayim. Wait a second, nothing can be brought after Tumash Ben Abayim. I thought you said all night long you bring karbanas. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, no. He asked the question and he answered it. He says, we're talking about when they were leftovers from the karbanas, meaning the blood was thrown before the Talmud. They just didn't get a chance to sacrifice it. So once it was already fit to be sacrificed beforehand, and therefore it's considered as if it was completed after Tumash Shachar, not after Kamar Tumash Ben Harbaim, which essentially the Ivar Padam that they sacrificed all night long. You could do that. It's not being considered as if you bring after Tumash Ben Abayim, because you already brought the Zrikas Adam, you already did it from before the Tumash Ben Abayim. A similar type of a contradiction. Remember the Rav Saf and the Rav. He has, as a pasuk siv, it says in Shemais, L'yom la'bayk, you shall not leave over till the morning. Zevech Chag Pesach. The carbon of the Pesach, you can't leave it over up until the morning. Now the inference is, L'bayk hu d'leyon, you can't leave it over until the morning. Hakala layla kula, hakala layla yom. But all night long, on the night of Yom Tov, the Seder night, they could go ahead and be burning the limbs, the parts of the Karban Pesach, which have to be sacrificed on the Mizbech. So, although it's really considered leftovers from a weekday carbon, because you bring the carbon on Erev Yom Tov on the 14th of Nisan, and that's when you throw the blood of the Karban Pesach, so it's so to speak a weekday carbon, still it sounds like all night long you could be sacrificing those limbs of the Karban Pesach. The problem is, what said the pasuk that it says, Oil Shabbos b'Shabbat, the oil of Shabbos can be brought on Shabbos, which teaches us, and there's a whole discussion on this, but not the weekday oil on Shabbos, And not the weekday oil on Yom Tov. So he says, how do you know this from here? But being that as an A, you can only bring a Shabbos carbon on Shabbos, a weekday Yom Tov carbon on Yom Tov. You can't bring a weekday carbon on Yom Tov. So how are you telling me that the carbon Pesach can't be left over until the morning? But that means to say all night long you could be sacrificing it. This is a weekday carbon. You burn on Erev Pesach. It was burned during a weekday. How can you go ahead and sacrifice it all night long? It's oilas chayil b'yomtiv. So Amalei said to him, this question was already posed. In the answer, and he says, it's not a difficult. Why? Hach over here that we said that all night long on Yom Tov, you're allowed to go and sacrifice the carbon Pesach. That was Barba Asr. That was when Erev Pesach was Shechaliyas B'Shabbos Askin, like it's this year, where the Erev Pesach was on Shabbos. The Chelve Shabbos Karev Yom Tov. It's the fats of Shabbos that are being burned on Yom Tov. It's a Shabbos carbon. Although it's not really a Shabbos carbon, that's where we learn that similar ideas that anything on Shabbos is already a high madrega, even though a regular thing is not Shabbos related. Automatically, when it's being done on Shabbos, it's considered Chelve Shabbos. So this carbon Pesach was Chelve Shabbos, and therefore you could go ahead and sacrifice it throughout the night, because it's Chelve Shabbos. But then Amalei said to him, what? Because the fats of a Shabbos carbon can be sacrificed on Yom Tov. We have to go ahead and now explain that this pasuk, which told me you're allowed to burn the carbon Pesach all night long of the Seder night, you're going to tell me that it's Arbos and Shchalis B'Shabbos with them? That's specifically talking about when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, like it's this year. The pasuk doesn't say anything like that. The pasuk just says, just don't leave it on until the morning. You're going to tell me the whole pasuk is only for the times when Pesach is when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos? So Malay says, Shafke the Kral, leave alone the pasuk. Says, because anyway, it's difficult. We already said that there seems to be a contradiction. How do you understand the pasuk? It says that you can't bring a weekday carbon on Shabbos. So therefore, obviously, you have to interpret the pasuk like that it must be talking about, yes, when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, and then you can go ahead and burn the carbon throughout the night on Matzah Shabbos on the night of Yom Tov, because anyways it's difficult. So yeah, that's how we're going to have to interpret the pasuk, because we anyways have no other way of interpreting it. To the next Mishnah, which continues discussing regarding the Carbon Pesach, and we talk about invalidations in the Carbon Pesach. The Carbon Pesach was slaughtered not for its namesake, means that when you were slaughtering, you had in mind a carbon shlamim. Or let's say the kibul, you did one of the other avodas of Kabbalah Saddam, receiving the blood, or Bahalach, or when you're transporting the blood, or Vizarik, or when you're throwing the blood. If you did it Shaloi L'Shmai, which these are the four types of avodas, that the carbon Pesach could be invalidated when you're thinking an inappropriate thought, whether to make it invalid, like we're talking about Shaloi L'Shma, or to make it pigul, which as the Gemara is going to learn down in the Sat is often of Dalam and Aleph. These are the four avodas, and therefore if you have a machshav of Shaloi L'Shma, it's going to make it possible. Or let's say Oy L'Shmai b'Shaloi L'Shmai. Or let's say it's L'Shmai and Shaloi L'Shmai. So the Gemara will explain, are we talking about having a machshav by one avodah? By let's say in the Shechita itself, or the Kabbalah itself, you're having for its sake and not for its sake? I'm thinking for it to be a Pesach and a Shlamim? Or are we talking about by two different avodas? For example, when he did the Kabbalah, when he received the blood of the animal after it was shafted, he had in mind that it should be a carbon Pesach. When he threw the blood, then he had in mind for a carbon Shlamim, which is Shalei L'Shma. Oi, Shalei L'Shma L'Shmai, which is the opposite order as the Mishnah is going to explain. Let's say first he had in mind Shalei L'Shmai, then L'Shmai. Either way, says the Mishnah Apostle is going to be possible because the Apostle says Zevach Pesach. Who? The word who tells you that it should be slaughtered for a carbon Pesach, and which tells you that it's excluding if it was slaughtered Shalei L'Shma, then it's not going to be valid. Says the Mishnah, Ketzad L'Shmai B'Shalei L'Shma. What does it mean for its sake and not for its sake? Which, if he first did L'Shem Pesach, L'Shem Shlam. What Shalei L'Shma L'Shmai is just the opposite order. L'Shem Shlam, L'Shem Pesach, we had in mind first for a Shlam. And then for Pesach, again, either one is going to be possible because it was done Shalei L'Shma, and a carbon Pesach that's done Shalei L'Shma is not a valid carbon Pesach. So we're discussing today's Daf, Pesachim Daf test, was we had two different braces regarding what's the order of the evening on Erev Pesach. The first brisa says, first you do carbon tamid, then carbon Pesach, then keteris, and then neiros. Why? So the order is like this. The carbon tamid only says bein harabayim. Carbon Pesach has Erev and bein harabayim. So therefore that seems to indicate a later evening than the carbon tamid. Now what's with keteris and neiros? They also only say one time bein harabayim. They should be before the carbon Pesach too. No. It says oisoi, yarach oisoi, aren't v'uvanov. This is the only thing that should be from evening till morning, which is by the neighbors, which tells us that obviously nothing can be after the neighbors. and the pasuk equates keteris to the neiros. So therefore, keteris and neiros are both going to be after the Korban Pesach. But those who say no, some say actually first Tamid, then keteris, then neiros, and actually the last thing is Pesach. And Pesach makes sense because that's the Ben Abayim and the Erev. And those keteris and neiros only say Ben Abayim. I wouldn't do it Oisai. I thought Oisai is saying that only this could be the last thing. No, Oisai is not excluding the Korban Pesach outside. Oisai by the neiros is excluding the keteris. To say that the neiros is after the keteris. Why? I would have thought to say keteris after that of the neiros. If you read the pasuk, it actually sounds like that. Sounds like, okay, after he lit, then he does the keteris. No, it's telling you that no, it's that when he's coming to light, then the keteris should already been burned. That's what Isis is coming to teach us. Let me say the keteris is the only thing that's brought before the Tamid Shal Shachar, because the Tamid Shal Shachar says only one baker, and here it says ba baker, which is earlier in the morning. That's the one exception, which before the Tamid Shal Shachar. Now, we said everyone agrees on Erev Pesach that if someone forgot to bring his mechutz kippurim, let's say mitzayra, zav, he forgot to bring those karbanos, yoledis, that they could bring the mechutz kippurim carbon after Tamid Shal B'Navam. Even though you're not allowed to, because it violates aseh dashlama. Here you're allowed to, because or else you're not going to be able to have the Korban Pesach, and aseh of Korban Pesach, which has kares, is going to override aseh dashlama. But we had a machlekes regarding if, let's say, a regular mechutz kippurim on a regular day of the year, could you bring it after Tamid Shal B'Navam? So then the question was, why? Why could you bring? Why is Aseh of eating kachim violate the Aseh Hashlama? So that says the Gemara, it actually preempts the Aseh Hashlama. Either to Machat Sa'if, where the Mizbeach only has the blood, and the Aseh Hashlama is only Bahaktara, or we're talking about no Chatas Behema. So why? How are you allowed to violate the Aseh Hashlama? You're not violating. Malo Malin B'Rish Hashem Mizbeach. You go ahead and you put it on top of the Mizbeach. Now, the question that the Gemara had asked was, but then you're going to cause takala. No, it's not going to cause takala because Kamma is name. But what does it mean? But what does it help? If you put it in Tamaz Be'ach, then you didn't sacrifice the Emurim, then the Kohen can't eat, and then the Bible doesn't have kapara. So no, it's not true. Because since it's not possible, so therefore it's like it became Tameh and it got lost, which Kam could eat, and the Bible could have the kapara. Then the Gemara asked on Rav Chizda, on the first interpretation, the Tumah Chatas Sa'if, but that's only running the Chatas. What do you do with the Ashim of the Mitzvah, which is not an Oiv Karban? He said that he was already sacrificed. When we said he didn't bring his Karban, he only forgot not to bring his Chatas. But then what do you do with the Ayla? And we proved that the Ayla is Ma'akim. And it can't be that you already brought your Ayla because there's a Bana Av that Chatas comes before the Ayla, even Mechatas Oiv. So what are you going to do with his Ayla? So, and you can't say like we said, Ayla was already brought because if you didn't bring the Chatas, you didn't bring the Ayla. So the Gemara says, actually, the one exception is our case. Oylas Mitzayra, the Torah says Vehela, which Helikvar, which actually could be before the Chatas. And therefore, that's the case of Toma, that you only didn't bring the Chatas of the Oiv, but the Oyla, which is a behemoth, actually you brought already beforehand. Now we had two contradictions. One, if you could go ahead and be Mala the whole nighttime, after the Tamid Shabbein Abayim, which we said nothing could be brought after. So he said, no, Toma, where it was leftovers. The Ivar Pedar were leftover, you already threw the blood away. That you could do all night. It's a carbon that was not burned at all, that you can't do after Tumah Shabbat Abayim. All right, another stira, if you could be Malei Varm by Pesach on the night of Yom Tiv, which one pasuk sounds like you just can't do it after the morning, but all night you could do it. Problem is, but it's Oilas Chayil, which is forbidden to be done on Yom Tiv. He says, no, we're talking about Yudal, Shechalis B'Shabbos, that's the case of that pasuk that says you can't do it after the morning, but all night you could do it, because that's considered Oilas Shabbos B'Yom Tiv, which you're allowed to do. Then we started the next Mishnah, which said, if any one of the four avodas that are the integral avodas of a Korban Pesach, do Shalei Lishma, or Shalei Lishma Lishma, or Lishma Shalei Lishma, then it's going to be puzzles we discuss in the next stuff. Thank you to any time posting.